You won't believe how the story ended when a racist police officer stopped a black surgeon. He didn't even realize that the doctor was in a hurry to save his daughter. And before watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and share this story with your friends. And here we go. Chapter 1. In a small town in Missouri where everyone knew each other, life flowed smoothly and calmly. The streets were filled with the bright lights of shops, and the scent of freshly baked bread from a local bakery wafted in the air. But under this external idyll, there were problems that no one talked about out loud. In this city, Police Chief David Hunter was known for his strict approach to law enforcement. He was a man who always kept order, but his bias and stereotypes about black citizens often put him in awkward situations. David grew up in a family where respect for the law came first. His father, also a police chief, always taught him that the law is sacred. However, as David got older, he began to notice that his perception of the world was shaped not only by his upbringing but also by the environment. He often heard conversations about crime and violence associated with certain groups of people, and these stereotypes gradually took root in his mind. He started every morning with a jog through the familiar streets. He loved watching the city wake up. Shops were opening, people were rushing to work, children were going to school. But even in these simple moments, he could feel the tension that was in the air. He was constantly thinking about how to keep order and security in this small town. Chapter 2. The Evening Shift. One evening, as the sun was setting, David was patrolling the streets of his city. He was always attentive to the little things, to how people behave on the streets, to the cars that pass by. That evening, he noticed a black car speeding down the street. His instincts kicked in and he decided to stop the car. When he got to the car, he went to the window with a serious expression on his face. "Do you know that you are breaking the law?" he asked with an authoritative tone. Inside was Dr. Michael Johnson, a talented black surgeon at a local hospital. He was in a hurry to get home after a long day at work. Michael received an alarming call from his wife. Their 10-year-old daughter, Leah, was in a serious accident and was taken to the hospital. Michael's heart was pounding with fear, and he raced through the streets, ignoring traffic lights and speed limits. "My daughter was in an accident. I need to go to the hospital," he said with a tremor in his voice, trying to explain the situation. However, David did not believe him. In his head, stereotypes about black citizens intersected with his preconceived notions. "You're just trying to get out. Calm down and show your documents," he said with a cold tone. Michael felt his anger rise. "I don't have time for this. My daughter could die," he exclaimed. Chapter 3. Conflict of Interest. David remained adamant. He started recording the data and calling for help. At this point, Michael continued to insist that he needed to go. "Dr. Johnson." David began, but Michael was already ready to rip the car out of his hands. "I understand, but I need to know what's going on with my daughter," said the police chief. David's heart began to beat faster as he realized the gravity of the situation. He was vacillating between his preconceived beliefs and his growing concern for his own daughter. At that moment, the chief's radio received a call about an accident involving a minor. When he heard the address, his heart skipped a beat. It was the same neighborhood where his own daughter Emily lived. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. David realized that it could be his daughter, and his internal conflict reached its peak. He glanced at Michael and saw in his eyes the same panic and fear that he felt himself. "Let's go together," he said abruptly. He turned on the siren and motioned for Michael to follow him. Both men raced through the streets of the city, and at that moment, an unexpected understanding arose between them. Michael shared his fears for Leah, and David listened attentively. "I can't imagine what would happen if something happened to her," Michael said, his voice trembling with emotion. David felt embarrassed that he had once doubted the sincerity of this man. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctors were already ready for surgery. David waited in the hallway with Michael. Time passed slowly. Every sound seemed deafening. Chapter 5. Operation. It took several hours before the doctor came out of the operating room. His face was serious, and Michael's heart skipped a beat in fear. "How is she?" he asked with trepidation. "She's in stable condition," the doctor replied. "We did our best." Michael felt relieved, and tears of joy filled his eyes. He hugged David. "Thank you for helping me." David nodded. "I was wrong about you. I shouldn't have judged by appearance." This confession was an important lesson for him. Chapter 6. A New Friendship. After this incident, David and Michael struck up a friendship. They began meeting regularly, discussing not only their families and work, but also the problems of racial prejudice in society. David began to realize how much his biases influenced his perception of the world around him. Michael shared his feelings about how difficult it was to be a black doctor in a small town where racial stereotypes still held sway. He talked about his difficulties at work and how sometimes patients treated him with distrust just because of his skin color. David listened to him with an open heart and understanding. "I never thought about it," he confessed. "I was only thinking about law and order." One evening, they met in a cafe and discussed their dreams and hopes for the future. "I want to change the world around me," Michael said. "I want to help people understand each other." David nodded. "Me too." Chapter 7. Changes. Inspired by their experience, David and Michael decided to organize meetings for the residents of the city to discuss issues of racial prejudice and create a safer community for everyone. They invited residents of different racial groups to share their stories and experiences. A lot of people gathered at the first meeting, from elderly residents to young people. Everyone could talk about their feelings and fears. David gave a speech about how important it is to see a person behind their appearance and bias. This meeting was the beginning of changes in their city. People began to open up to each other and discuss topics that were previously considered taboo. But not all residents were happy with such changes. Some expressed dissatisfaction and resisted new ideas. This only increased David and Michael's desire to continue their work. Chapter 8. Problems don't go away. However, the changes did not come easily. There were those who resisted new ideas and continued to adhere to old stereotypes. Some residents of the city expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that David and Michael were trying to change established traditions. One night, a rock was thrown at Michael's house with threats scribbled on paper. "Get out of our city!" This message deeply shocked the Johnson family. Michael told David about this during their next meeting. "I do not know how to stop this," he said with desperation in his voice. "It seems that we are only inciting hatred." David felt anger for his friend and for all the good they were trying to do for society. "We cannot give up," he said decisively. "We need to keep working on this." Chapter 9. Joining Forces. Having gathered together with other residents of the city, they decided to organize a rally against hatred and bias. They developed an action plan and invited local media to cover the event. On the day of the rally, the city was filled with people of different racial groups. They held placards with inscriptions about peace and unity. David spoke to the crowd about the importance of equality and respect. "We must unite against hate," he said fervently. "We have to show everyone that our city is open to everyone." Michael stood next to him and felt proud that they had achieved such a unification of forces. However, not everything went smoothly. During the rally, opponents of their idea appeared. A group of people began shouting insults and provocations. The situation escalated to the limit. Some participants began to clash. David quickly assessed the situation and approached the crowd of opponents. "Listen, we're not here to fight, we're here to talk." His words helped calm the tension. Fortunately, the police were on site and were able to prevent further riots. After this incident, many residents began to realize the importance of such events for social cohesion. Chapter 10. Life Lessons. Over time, changes began to occur in the city. People began to communicate more with each other, regardless of skin color or social status. David continued to work on improving relations between the police and the community. Michael has also become an active participant in local initiatives to improve health care for all populations. He organized free medical consultations for people from less affluent backgrounds. One day, during one of these consultations, a middle-aged woman approached him with a request to help her deal with her illness. She was white and looked scared. "I never thought of going to a black doctor," she confessed sheepishly. Michael smiled at her with a kind smile. "I'm here to help you, regardless of your skin color." This moment became a symbol of the change of thinking that was taking place in their city. Chapter 11. A New Era. A year after that first incident between David and Michael, they organized a big unity festival in the city center. This event brought together people of all ages and racial groups. They enjoyed music, food, and socializing with each other. The festival has become a symbol of the fact that it is possible to overcome biases and build a more cohesive community. People began to understand each other better. They shared their stories and learned to see the world through each other's eyes. David and Michael stood on stage together and looked at the crowd of people in front of them with pride that they were able to achieve this moment of unity. During the festival, they organized various events, contests for children, exhibitions of local artists, and musical performances by talented musicians from different parts of the country. Everyone could find something interesting for themselves. An atmosphere of joy filled the air. Chapter 12. Unforeseen Consequences. However, not everything went smoothly after the Unity Festival. Some residents still resisted the changes and continued to adhere to old prejudices. There were cases of attacks on people of another race. This caused alarm among many residents of the city. David decided to hold a meeting with local community leaders to discuss the situation. He understood the importance of dialogue between different groups of the population to prevent violence. Representatives of various racial groups were present at the meeting. Everyone could express their opinion about what was happening in the city. The discussion was emotional. Many people talked about their fears and experiences. "We have to work together," David said during one of the discussions. "We must show all our neighbors that hatred has no place in our society." Michael echoed his words. "We need to create a space for open communication. That's the only way we can understand each other." Chapter 13. The Future. Several years have passed. The city has changed beyond recognition. Now there were more cultural exchange events. People actively participated in the life of the community regardless of their race or origin. David continued his work as police chief. He became more open to change and understanding of the people around him. His relationship with Michael became stronger. They became real friends. One day, during lunch together, Michael said, "I never would have thought that our friendship would become such an important part of my life." David nodded. "Me too. We both learned a lot from each other." Chapter 14. Conclusion. This story was a turning point for both men and their entire city. They have become a symbol of change and hope for many people around them. Each of them realized the importance of openness to other people and willingness to learn from each other. They learned to see a person behind their appearance and bias. This became the basis for a new understanding between different cultures in their community. After all, it is stories like this that show us that despite our differences, we are all human beings. It is only important to open up to each other and be ready to change for the common good. Chapter 15. New Horizons. Over time, David decided to launch a program to improve police interaction with the local population. He understood the importance of trust between law enforcement agencies and citizens. Therefore, he initiated the creation of a public council under the police. This council consisted of representatives of various racial groups. Their task was to identify the problems of the community and find ways to solve them together with the police. Michael became an active member of the council. He used his medical knowledge to organize public health through free medical examinations during community events. These initiatives have helped improve relations between the police and citizens. People have begun to trust law enforcement agencies more through open dialogue. Chapter 16. Acknowledging changes. Over time, the changes became noticeable not only within the community but also attracted media attention outside the city. Journalists began to come to cover the success of the police community engagement program. This led to positive reviews of the city at the national level. David and Michael have become local heroes. Their story has inspired other cities to launch similar initiatives to improve relations between different populations. Once, during an interview, David said, "We all want the same thing, to live in a world without hate." These words have become a motto for many people across the country. Chapter 17. The Way Forward. Despite the success of the police community engagement program, the work was not yet complete. Both sides understood the need for constant dialogue to maintain peace in society. David continued to work on improving relations between the police and citizens. He initiated additional training for police officers on intercultural communication. Michael also continued his work to improve public health. He organized healthy lifestyle seminars for city residents, regardless of their race or social status. These efforts helped create a more cohesive society. People began to understand the importance of helping each other regardless of differences. Chapter 18. Legacy of Change. After years of working together, David and Michael looked back at the path they had traveled together. Their friendship has become a symbol of change for many people around them. They have proved to everyone that it is possible to overcome bias for the common good. When it came time to hold another Unity Festival, they decided to make it even bigger. Now, this event attracted people from all over the country. Musicians of various genres performed at the festival. Master classes on arts and crafts of various cultural traditions were held. Everyone could find something interesting for themselves. The atmosphere of joy filled the air again. Chapter 19. A New Chapter. On the day of the festival, David spoke to the crowd about the importance of unity among differences. We're all different, but it's these differences that make us unique. His words provoked a round of applause from the audience. Michael stood next to him. He felt proud that they were able to achieve such a level of understanding among people of different racial groups. The festival has become an annual tradition. Every year, the residents of the city come together to celebrate unity among differences. Chapter 20. Completion. The story of David Hunter and Michael Johnson has become an example of how important it is to open up to new ideas and be ready to change for the common good of society. Their friendship showed all the people around them that despite our differences, we can all live together in peace if we respect each other. This became the foundation of a new generation of people who are ready to fight against hatred for a future without prejudice. Thus ended the story of two men who changed their city forever. Their legacy lives on among people who believe in the power of unity among differences.